The great chamber of the Galactic Union Council stretched upward like the inside of a hollow mountain. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform, where speakers stood to address the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. Light filtered down from crystal panels in the ceiling, casting everything in a soft golden glow. It was a place built to inspire hope and cooperation. Today, it would witness neither. Ambassador Sitha of the Velith stood at the central platform. Her smooth blue-green skin glistened under the lights. Her large, dark eyes moved across the faces of the council members, searching for sympathy. She was small compared to most species in the chamber. Her people were amphibians from a water-rich moon called Nithara. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. Evolution had given them gentle hands meant for healing and creating, not fighting. "Please," Sitha said, her voice carrying through the translation systems that allowed all species to understand each other. "The Corax Dominion has already conquered 3 systems on our border. Their warships grow closer each day. My people have no military. We have never known war. We are scholars, healers, and artists. If the Dominion reaches Nithara, we will be enslaved or destroyed." She paused, hoping her words would move them. The Velith had been members of the Galactic Union for 200 years. They had contributed medical knowledge that saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Their artists had created works of beauty that hung in museums on every civilized planet. Surely that meant something. The Rithian ambassador, a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms, leaned forward. "Ambassador Sitha, we are sorry for your situation, but the Corax Dominion commands over 1,000 warships. Defending your moon would require significant military resources. What strategic value does Nithara offer to justify such an expenditure?" Sitha felt her heart sink. Strategic value, resources, expenditure. These were the words of accountants, not allies. "Our world has no rare minerals," she admitted. "We have no weapons to offer. But we have our people, 12 million Velith, who have lived in peace for generations. Is that not enough?" Silence answered her. The Torvan delegate, a massive creature covered in gray scales, spoke next. "The Union's charter allows for defensive assistance when requested. However, it does not require member states to intervene. Each world must decide for itself whether to commit forces. I regret to inform you that Torvax Prime will not be sending ships to Nithara. The risk of full-scale war with the Corax is too great." One by one, the major powers gave their answers. The crystalline beings of Voss abstained, claiming neutrality in all military matters. The hegemony of Kreth expressed sympathy but explained that their fleet was committed elsewhere. The Syndicate of Free Worlds offered thoughts and prayers but nothing more. Sitha listened to each refusal. She watched powerful nations with massive fleets explain why they could not spare even a single ship. She heard wealthy civilizations describe why protecting 12 million innocent lives was simply not economical. When the voting concluded, the result was clear. Nithara would receive no protection from the Galactic Union. The Velith would face the Corax alone. The council speaker, an elderly being from a species Sitha did not recognize, cleared his throat. "The motion for military intervention on behalf of Nithara has failed. This council offers its condolences to the Velith people. May fortune favor your world." Fortune. As if luck could stop warships, Sitha stepped down from the platform. Her legs felt weak. Around her, delegates were already leaving, moving on to the next item of business. The fate of her entire species had been decided in less than an hour, and most of the galaxy was already thinking about lunch. She walked toward the exit, keeping her head down. Tears threatened to fall from her large eyes, but she held them back. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Let them remember the Velith as dignified, even in their final days. "Ambassador Sitha," the voice came from her left. She turned and saw a group of beings she barely recognized. They were bipedal, with soft skin and various shades of brown and pink. Their bodies were unremarkable, neither especially strong nor especially fast. They had no natural armor, no claws, nothing that suggested they were dangerous. Humans, that was what they were called. Sitha searched her memory for information about them. A young species, barely a century into space travel, they had arrived on the galactic scene with enthusiasm and curiosity, but they commanded no great fleets and controlled no vast territories. They were considered friendly but insignificant. "Yes?" Sitha said, too tired for pleasantries. The human who had spoken was a female with dark hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple uniform with no medals or decorations. I am Ambassador Sarah Chen. I represent the United Human Alliance. May I speak with you privately? Sitha almost refused. What could humans possibly offer? They were even smaller than the Velith in terms of galactic influence. But something in the human's eyes made her pause. There was no pity there, no empty sympathy. There was something else. Something that looked almost like anger. Very well, Sitha said. They walked together to a small meeting room off the main chamber. It was simple, with a round table and several chairs designed to accommodate different body types. The human ambassador sat across from Sitha and was quiet for a moment. What happened in there was wrong, Chen said finally. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Sitha blinked. Many would say it was simply practical. Then many are cowards hiding behind mathematics. Chen leaned forward. Your people asked for help. They asked a union that your world has supported for 2 centuries. And every single member turned away because saving you might cost them something. That is the nature of galactic politics, Sitha said bitterly. The strong do what they wish. The weak suffer what they must. No. Chen shook her head. That is the nature of cowardice, and it is not the nature of humanity. Sitha studied the human carefully. What are you saying, Ambassador? I am saying that the United Human Alliance did not vote in that chamber because we are not yet full members of the Council. We only have observer status. But if we had been allowed to vote, we would have voted yes. A symbolic gesture. I appreciate the thought, but it changes nothing. Chen smiled slightly. Ambassador, I am not offering symbols. I am offering ships. Sitha's breath caught. What? Humanity cannot match the Corex fleet in numbers. We have perhaps 40 combat-ready vessels and a few thousand ground troops, but we are offering all of them. We are offering to stand beside your people and defend Nithara. The words did not make sense. Sitha shook her head slowly. Why? You gain nothing from this. Nithara has nothing to offer you. The major powers refused because helping us brings risk without reward. You face the same calculation. Do we? Chen's expression grew serious. Ambassador, humanity has a troubled history. There was a time when we fought among ourselves constantly. Nations watched while other nations committed terrible crimes. People stood by while their neighbors were dragged away to die. We called it being practical. We called it minding our own business. We called it a lot of things to avoid admitting we were simply afraid. She paused, and Sitha saw old pain in her eyes. We learned, Chen continued. We learned that silence in the face of evil is the same as participation. We learned that looking away does not make you innocent. And we swore, as a species, that we would never again stand by while innocents suffer. Never again. Never again. Sitha repeated softly. The words felt like a prayer. Your people asked for help. Every great power in this galaxy turned away. But we are not great, Ambassador. We are small and young and probably foolish. And we are saying yes. Sitha felt the tears she had been holding back finally fall. They ran down her blue-green cheeks and dripped onto the table. The Corax will destroy you alongside us. You know this. Maybe. Chen reached across the table and took Sitha's hand. Human hands were warm, Sitha noticed. Warm and gentle. But at least your people will know they were not alone. At least the galaxy will know that someone stood up. And maybe, just maybe, we will surprise everyone. Humans are good at that. Why? Sitha whispered. Why would you die for strangers? Chen squeezed her hand. Because you needed help. Because we could give it. Because that is who we choose to be. The small meeting room was quiet. Outside, the great powers of the galaxy continued their business, already forgetting the Velith. But in this small space, something had changed. A promise had been made. How soon can your ships arrive? Sitha asked. The first wave can reach Nithara within 2 weeks. More will follow. Sitha wiped her eyes and straightened her posture. For the first time since entering the council chamber, she felt something other than despair. It was small and fragile, but it was real. Hope. Then I must return home and prepare my people, she said. They will not believe me when I tell them someone answered our call. Chen stood and offered her hand in what Sitha had learned was a human gesture of agreement. Tell them the humans are coming. Tell them they are not forgotten. And tell them we keep our promises. Sitha took the hand and held it tightly. Thank you, Ambassador. Whatever happens next, thank you. As she left the chamber and walked toward her ship, Sitha thought about the great powers who had refused her. They had fleets and wealth and influence. They had everything except courage. And then she thought about the humans, young and small and probably doomed. They had nothing except the willingness to stand when others sat. Perhaps, she thought, that was worth more than all the warships in the galaxy. The journey home would take several days. She had much to tell her people. The galaxy had abandoned them, but someone had answered. Someone had risen to protect the forgotten. The humans were coming. The human diplomatic vessel cut through the darkness of space like a silver needle. It was not a large ship, nothing compared to the massive dreadnoughts of the Corax or the elegant cruisers of the Torvan. But it carried something more valuable than weapons or armor. It carried promise. Elder Sitha stood at the viewing port of her own vessel, watching the human ship fly alongside. 2 weeks had passed since that small meeting room in the council chambers. 2 weeks of explaining to her people that help was coming. 2 weeks of facing disbelief and then cautious hope. Now she traveled back to Nythera with the human delegation, and everything felt different. Admiral James Chen sat across from her in the meeting room. He was older than Ambassador Sarah Chen, though Sitha had learned they were siblings. His face was weathered, marked by lines that came from years of hard decisions, but his eyes were warm. And when he spoke, his voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had faced death before and was not afraid. We have 42 combat vessels ready to deploy, he said, showing her a display of the human fleet. That includes 12 destroyers, 24 frigates, and 6 heavy cruisers. We also have transport ships carrying ground forces and equipment. Sitha looked at the numbers. They seemed so small. The Corax command over 300 warships in this sector alone. Yes, Chen nodded. They do, and yet you still come. Numbers are not everything, Elder. The Corax are powerful, but they are also arrogant. They have conquered weak species who could not fight back. They have never faced an enemy willing to make them pay for every inch of space. You believe you can defeat them? Chen was silent for a moment. I believe we can hurt them badly enough that they will reconsider, and if we cannot, then at least your people will have time to evacuate. We will buy that time with everything we have. Sitha felt her throat tighten. Admiral, I must ask again. Why? Your ambassador spoke of promises and principles, but surely there must be more. What do humans truly gain from this? Chen leaned back in his chair and studied her with those thoughtful eyes. Elder, may I tell you a story? Please. A long time ago, on our homeworld, there was a great war. Nations fought across the entire planet. Millions died. And during that war, there were places where terrible things happened. Places where innocent people were taken from their homes and killed simply because of who they were. Sitha listened in silence. Other nations knew what was happening. They received reports, photographs, evidence, but they did nothing. They told themselves it was not their problem. They told themselves intervention was too costly. They looked away. Chen's voice grew heavy. When the war ended and the full truth was revealed, the world was horrified. How could we have let this happen? How could we have known and done nothing? The guilt of that silence haunted humanity for generations. And so you swore never again, Sitha said softly. We carved those words into monuments. We taught them to our children. We promised ourselves that when innocents called for help, we would answer. That promise is the only thing that separates us from the cowards who watched and did nothing. He met her eyes directly. Your people called for help, Elder. The galaxy watched and did nothing. If we do the same, then we are no better than those who looked away while millions died. And we will not be that. We cannot be that. Sitha understood then. This was not about strategy or resources or political gain. This was about the soul of a species. Humans were fighting to prove something to themselves, to honor promises made to the dead. Your people carry a heavy burden, she said. Yes, but it makes us stronger. Chen smiled slightly. Now, shall we discuss defensive preparations? We have much work to do before the Corax arrive. The fleet reached Nythera 3 days later. The water moon hung in space like a blue and green jewel, its surface covered in vast oceans dotted with island chains and floating cities. It was beautiful and fragile and utterly defenseless. The Velith had never built warships. They had never needed them. Their civilization was based on cooperation, art, and healing. Violence was something they read about in history books or saw in reports from distant worlds. It was not part of their culture. Now human ships took up positions around their world. And everything changed. Admiral Chen established a command center in the capital city of Mithral. It was a beautiful place, built on interconnected platforms that floated on the warm equatorial ocean. Towers of white stone rose toward the sky, connected by graceful bridges. Gardens filled every available space, blooming with flowers in 1,000 colors. Elder Sitha walked beside Chen through the streets. Citizens stopped and stared at the strange creatures who had come to protect them. Human soldiers moved through the city, but they did not march like conquerors. They smiled at children. They helped elderly Veleth carry packages. They treated the locals with respect and kindness. "Your people are not what I expected," Sitha admitted. "What did you expect? Warriors. Grim-faced killers preparing for battle?" Chen laughed. "We are warriors, Elder. But we are also teachers, doctors, engineers, and artists. Humans contain multitudes. We can fight with terrible fury, and then turn around and build hospitals. That is our nature." As if to prove his point, a group of human engineers was working nearby, helping Veleth workers reinforce a water treatment facility. They were teaching the locals how to build underground shelters, how to establish emergency communication networks, how to prepare for the worst. "You are not just preparing to fight," Sitha realized. "You are preparing us to survive. The battle might be lost," Chen said honestly. "We have to consider that possibility. If the Korax break through, your people need to be ready. They need to know how to hide, how to resist, how to endure until help can arrive." "What help?" "The galaxy has abandoned us. The galaxy is watching. They think we are fools marching to our deaths. But if we surprise them, if we show them that the Korax can be stopped, others might find their courage. That is the hope." A young Veleth child approached them, holding a small flower. She was barely waist-high to Chen, with huge, curious eyes. She held up the flower toward the human admiral, a gift for the stranger who had come to help. Chen knelt down to accept it. He was a warrior who commanded ships and weapons, but in that moment, he was simply kind. He thanked the child in her own language, using words the Veleth translators had taught him. The girl giggled and ran away. "She has no idea what is coming," Sitha said quietly. "No, but she will know that someone stood for her. Whatever happens, she will know that." The days passed quickly. Human soldiers trained Veleth volunteers in basic defense and emergency response. Engineers built shield generators around major population centers. Medics established field hospitals. Communication arrays went up, linking every city and settlement on the moon. And then the message came. It arrived on all frequencies, transmitted across the entire system. The voice belonged to Warlord Thess of the Korax Dominion, commander of the Third Conquest Fleet. "Attention, humans. You have entered territory claimed by the Korax Dominion. Your presence is unwelcome. You have 72 hours to withdraw your forces and leave the Veleth to their fate. Failure to comply will result in your complete destruction." The message included sensor data showing the Korax fleet assembling at the edge of the system. 300 warships, bristling with weapons, preparing to advance. Admiral Chen gathered his officers in the command center. The Veleth leadership joined them, including Elder Sitha. Everyone waited to hear what the human commander would say. "They expect us to run," Chen said calmly. "That is what the Korax understand. They conquered the weak because the weak submitted. They never faced anyone willing to stand." He looked around the room at human and Veleth faces alike. "We are not running. We are not surrendering. We made a promise to these people, and we will keep it." "Sir," one of his officers said, "should we respond to the Korax transmission?" "Yes." Chen stood straighter. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want the entire galaxy to hear this." The communication array hummed to life. Chen's face appeared on screens across 100 worlds. His voice carried to every corner of civilized space. "This is Admiral James Chen of the United Human Alliance. I am addressing Warlord Thess and the Korax Dominion." He paused, letting the words settle. The Veleth asked the galaxy for help. Every great power turned away. They found excuses. They made calculations. They looked at these peaceful people and decided they were not worth saving. His voice hardened. Humanity does not share that opinion. We are here. We are staying. And we will defend this world and its people with everything we have. Another pause. To Warlord Thess I say this. These people are under our protection. If you want them, you will have to come through us. And I promise you, we will make you bleed for every inch of space, every moment of time, every single life you try to take. He leaned forward slightly. The galaxy is watching. They think we are fools. Maybe we are. But we are fools who keep their promises. We are fools who stand when others sit. And we are fools who will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. His final words rang with quiet certainty. To the Velith people, you are not alone. You are not forgotten. We are here, and we are not leaving. Whatever comes, we face it together. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Elder Sitha stepped forward. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. She placed her hand over her hearts in the traditional Velith gesture of deepest gratitude. Admiral Chen, she said, whatever happens, my people will remember this moment forever. They will tell stories of the humans who stood when no one else would. They will sing songs of your courage. And they will teach their children that hope can come from the most unexpected places. Chen bowed his head respectfully. Then let us make sure those children live to hear those songs. Outside the command center, word of the transmission spread across Nithara. Velith citizens who had been preparing to flee now paused. They looked up at the sky where human ships stood guard, and they felt something they had not felt since the Korax first appeared on their borders. They felt protected. The countdown had begun. 72 hours until the storm arrived. But for the first time, the Velith were not facing it alone. The humans had come, and they were not leaving. 72 hours passed like water through open fingers. The Velith worked alongside humans to complete final preparations, knowing that time was running out. Shelters were reinforced. Evacuation routes were marked. Emergency supplies were distributed to every community on the moon. And then the Korax arrived. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UHA Defiance. Through the viewport, he could see the stars that had been peaceful just hours ago. Now those stars were partially blocked by the dark shapes of warships. The Korax fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 vessels of various sizes. From small attack craft to massive battle cruisers, they spread across the system like a metal storm cloud, blocking the light from distant stars. Enemy fleet. Confirmed, his tactical officer reported. 312 vessels, 47 capital ships, 265 support craft. They are holding position at the outer system boundary. Chen studied the display showing both fleets. His 42 ships were arranged in defensive positions around Nithara. They looked like a handful of pebbles facing an avalanche. Any response to our transmission? He asked. None yet, sir. Wait, incoming signal from the Korax flagship. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. Warlord Thess was massive even by Korax standards. His gray scales were marked with ritual scars that showed his rank and victories. His eyes were yellow and cold, like those of a predator studying prey. Admiral Chen. Thess spoke the name with contempt. I received your theatrical speech. Very moving. The galaxy must think you are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both. Chen replied calmly. Thess made a sound that might have been a laugh. I respect courage, human. It is rare in this galaxy, so I will make you an offer. Leave now, and I will allow your ships to withdraw unharmed. You have demonstrated your point. You have shown that someone was willing to stand for the Velith. Your honor is satisfied. Now be practical and go home. And the Velith? They will serve the Dominion. Their healers will tend our wounded. Their artists will decorate our halls. They will learn their place in the natural order. Chen's expression did not change. Slavery. You are offering them slavery. I am offering them survival. It is more than they would have otherwise. And if I refuse your generous offer? Thess leaned forward, his scarred face filling the screen. Then I will destroy every one of your ships. I will bombard their cities until nothing remains but ash and memories. And when historians write about this moment, they will speak of human foolishness, not human courage. The bridge was silent. Every officer watched their commander, waiting for his response. Chen took a slow breath. Warlord Thess, I want you to understand something. I know the numbers. I know how this looks on paper. By every reasonable calculation, we should retreat and let you have what you want." He stood straighter. "But we are not leaving. We made a promise to these people. They asked for help, and we answered. If we abandon them now because the odds are bad, then we are no different from everyone else who turned away. And we will not be that." Tess growled. "You will die for a species you barely know. Your ships will burn, your soldiers will fall, and nothing will change. The Velith will still belong to me." "Maybe," Chen acknowledged. "But maybe not. You have never fought humans before, Warlord. You have conquered worlds that could not resist. You have crushed species that had no weapons. But we have weapons, and we know how to use them. Your 40 ships against my 300? Numbers are not everything. We have something you do not understand. We have something worth fighting for." Tess studied him through the screen. For a moment, something flickered in those yellow eyes. Not fear exactly, but perhaps uncertainty. "You humans are strange," he said finally. "You could have lived. You could have returned to your homeworld and told stories of your moral victory. Instead, you choose death. We choose to keep our promise. So be it." Tess raised his hand in a gesture of command. "You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we advance, and nothing will stop us." The transmission ended. Chen stood quietly, feeling the weight of what was coming. "Sir," his executive officer approached. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Chen admitted. "But I am sure about one thing. If we leave now, we become exactly what we always feared becoming. We become the nations that stood by while innocents died. I will not carry that shame. I will not pass it on to my children. The crew understands, sir." "Every single one of them volunteered to stay," Chen nodded. "Then we give them something to be proud of. Whatever happens today, we show the galaxy what humanity stands for." Below, on the surface of Nithara, the population watched the sky. They could see the distant lights of the Korax fleet, a constellation of death hanging above their world. Fear gripped their hearts, but they also saw the human ships holding position between them and the enemy. They saw the small fleet that refused to move. Elder Sitha stood in the command center in Mithril, surrounded by screens showing military data she barely understood. Human officers moved around her, calm and professional despite the impossible odds. "Elder," a human lieutenant approached her. "Admiral Chen requests that you address your people. They need to hear from you." Sitha nodded. What could she possibly say? That everything would be fine? That they would survive? She could not promise things she did not believe, but she could tell them the truth. The broadcast systems activated, and her image appeared on screens across Nithara. Every Velith, from the floating cities to the smallest island settlements, stopped to listen. "My people," she began, her voice steady despite her fear. "The Korax fleet has arrived. They demand our surrender. They want us to become their slaves, to serve them for generations." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 2 weeks ago, I stood before the Galactic Union and begged for help. Every great power refused. They had reasons, explanations, calculations. They looked at us and decided we were not worth saving. Her voice gained strength. But we were not alone. When everyone else turned away, humanity answered. 40 ships, 4,000 soldiers. They came not for resources or strategic advantage. They came because we asked for help. They came because they believe it is wrong to abandon the innocent. She looked directly at the camera. "I cannot promise you victory. I cannot promise you survival. The enemy is vast, and our defenders are few. But I can promise you this. For the first time in our history, we are not facing darkness alone. Someone stood up for us. Someone decided we were worth protecting." Tears fell from her eyes. "Whatever happens today, remember this moment. Remember that when the galaxy abandoned us, humanity rose to stand in our defense. Remember their courage. Remember their sacrifice. And remember that there is still good in this universe, even when it seems that evil has won." She placed her hand over her hearts. "To our human friends, I say thank you. From the depths of our souls, thank you. You have given us something more valuable than victory. You have given us hope. You have shown us that we matter, and we will never forget." The broadcast ended. Across Nithara, Velith citizens held each other and wept. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Others simply stared at the sky, waiting for the storm. In the command center, human officers had stopped to listen to her words. Several were wiping their eyes. The lieutenant who had asked her to speak nodded respectfully. "That was beautiful, Elder." "It was the truth," she replied. "Now what happens next? Now we wait. And when they come, we fight." The hour passed quickly. In the final minutes, Admiral Chen addressed his fleet one last time. "This is the Admiral. In a few minutes the Corax will advance. You all know the odds. You all know what we face. But you stayed anyway. Every single one of you chose to be here." His voice filled every ship in the human fleet. "Today, we fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. We fight to prove that humanity keeps its promises. We fight because somewhere in this galaxy, there has to be someone willing to stand up for what is right." He paused. "Make me proud. Make humanity proud. And whatever happens, make them remember us." The final seconds ticked away. On the edge of the system, the Corax fleet began to move. 300 ships accelerated toward Nethera, weapons charging, shields activating. Admiral Chen watched them come. His heart was calm, his mind clear. He had made his choice. His people had made their choice. "All ships," he ordered. "Battle stations. Prepare to engage." The Defiance hummed with power as weapons came online. Around him, his bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They were scared, he knew. But they were also determined. The Corax fleet approached like a metal wave. In response, the 42 human ships held their ground. They did not retreat. They did not waver. The galaxy was watching. Observers from a dozen species monitored the battle from safe distances. They expected to witness a massacre, a lesson in the futility of idealism. They would witness something else entirely. "Enemy fleet entering weapons range," the tactical officer announced. Chen took a breath. "All ships, fire at will." The Battle of Nethera had begun. Space erupted in fire and light. The human fleet opened with everything they had. Missiles streaked across the void. Energy weapons painted bright lines between ships. The darkness of space became a canvas of destruction. The Corax expected their enemies to scatter. Smaller fleets always ran when faced with overwhelming numbers. It was the natural response of prey confronted by predators. But the humans did not run. They advanced. Admiral Chen's strategy was not about winning through pure firepower. He knew that was impossible. Instead, his ships moved in coordinated groups, using their smaller size and superior maneuverability to avoid the main guns of the Corax battle cruisers. "Wolfpack Alpha, target their command relay ships," Chen ordered. "Take out their coordination." A group of 4 frigates dove into the enemy formation, moving faster than the massive Corax vessels could track. They struck at communication ships, sensor platforms, and command links. The Corax fleet began to stumble. Individual captains, suddenly unsure of their orders. Warlord Thess watched from his flagship in growing fury. "These insects are in our midst, crush them." But crushing them proved difficult. Human ships never stayed still. They darted and weaved through the battle like aggressive fish attacking a slow whale. Their weapons were precise, targeting engines and weapon systems rather than going for direct kills. "They fight without honor," one of Thess's officers complained. "They strike and flee like cowards." "They fight to survive," Thess growled. "And they are succeeding." The battle raged for hours. Corax ships fell one by one, their systems crippled by precise strikes. But the humans paid a price as well. The frigate Dawn's Light was the first to fall, caught between 2 battle cruisers. The destroyer, Vigilant, sacrificed itself to protect a damaged ally. One by one, human ships were destroyed. But for every human ship lost, they took 5 Corax vessels with them. On the surface of Nithara, the Velith watched the sky. Brilliant flashes of light marked the battle above, like a deadly fireworks display. They held their breath with each explosion, not knowing which side had suffered. Elder Sitha stood in the command center, listening to military transmissions she could barely understand. Human officers shouted orders, coordinated defenses, reported losses. Their voices were strained but controlled. "Enemy landing craft detected," someone announced. "They are attempting to establish a ground position on the eastern continent." Sitha's hearts froze. The Corax were landing. The space battle was not enough to stop them. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. "Ground forces, prepare to repel." Protect the evacuation routes at all costs. Across Nythera, human soldiers moved to defensive positions. They were outnumbered badly, but they had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every possible advantage had been arranged, every defensive position carefully chosen. A young Velith named Ketho worked in one of the field hospitals near Mithril. He was a healer, trained in the medical arts that his people had practiced for generations. He had never seen violence before 2 weeks ago. Now he was preparing to treat wounds from weapons he could not even name. The first wounded began arriving within the hour. Human soldiers carried their injured comrades to the medical tents, their uniforms torn and bloodied. Ketho worked alongside human medics, his smaller hands useful for delicate procedures. Then something unexpected happened. A transport arrived carrying wounded from the Eastern Front. Among the injured humans were several Korax soldiers, their gray scales charred by weapons fire. Ketho stared at them. These were the enemy. These were the creatures who wanted to enslave his people. His first instinct was to turn away, to let them suffer. But the human medics did not hesitate. They began treating the Korax wounded with the same care and efficiency they showed their own soldiers. "What are you doing?" Ketho asked, confused. "They are enemies." A human medic named Roberts looked up from her work. She was young, with tired eyes and blood on her uniform. "They are wounded. That is all that matters right now. But they came to destroy us. They came to enslave my people." Roberts paused in her work. "I know. And when the battle is over, they will face justice for what their leaders ordered. But right now, they are just soldiers. They followed commands. Most of them probably did not choose this war any more than we did." She returned to her work, gently cleaning a wound on a Korax soldier who stared at her with confused eyes. "This is who we are," she continued. "We fight when we have to, but we do not become monsters. We do not lose ourselves in hatred. If we treat prisoners with cruelty, then we become no better than the people we fight against." Ketho watched her work. His entire understanding of warfare had come from stories and historical records. He had imagined it as simple, good versus evil, heroes versus villains. But this was more complicated. There was violence and mercy intertwined, hatred and compassion existing side by side. He moved to help another wounded Korax. The creature looked up at him, fear in its yellow eyes. "I am a healer," Ketho said quietly. "I will not harm you." Above the planet, the space battle reached its climax. The human fleet had been reduced to 23 ships. They had taken down over 100 Korax vessels, but the enemy still had nearly 200 remaining. The mathematics of destruction favored the Dominion. Warlord Thes finally lost patience. "Enough of this. Target the surface, destroy their capital city, show them the price of resistance." His flagship oriented toward Nythera, its main weapons charged, building up enough energy to vaporize a city. The beautiful floating city of Mithril appeared in the targeting display. Admiral Chen saw the maneuver. His tactical display showed the Korax flagship preparing to fire. At that range, with that much power, there was no defense possible. Mithril would be destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Velith would die in an instant. "No," Chen said. His voice was calm, but there was iron beneath it. "Sir?" His executive officer looked at him. "All ships, follow the Defiance. Maximum speed. Target the flagship." The crew understood. They knew what their commander was planning. They did not hesitate. The human flagship accelerated toward the Korax command vessel, all remaining ships following in formation. They pushed their engines beyond safe limits, crossing the distance in seconds rather than minutes. Thes saw them coming. "Destroy those ships, now." Korax weapons turned toward the advancing humans, but they were too slow. The Defiance slammed into the path of the flagship's main weapon just as it fired. The energy that would have destroyed Mithril instead struck the human vessel. The Defiance shuddered and broke apart, its hull cracking open. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure, but the shot was blocked. Mithril survived. Chen and his crew were thrown about the dying bridge. Consoles exploded. Fires broke out everywhere. The ship was finished. "All hands," Chen managed to say through the chaos. "Abandon ship." Escape pods launched from the disintegrating Defiance. The flagship had given everything to protect the city below. Warlord Thes stared at the destruction of the human command ship. He had seen many enemies die over his centuries of conquest, but he had never seen anyone sacrifice themselves like this. No species he had conquered had ever willingly placed themselves between his weapons and their targets. "They are insane," he muttered. "Completely insane." And then his sensors reported something new. Multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Ships were arriving. Not human ships. The first vessel to emerge was a Torvan cruiser, its gray hull marked with the symbol of their military. Behind it came more ships. Rithian destroyers. A Vossian diplomatic yacht that was somehow armed with weapons it should not have. Vessels from species that had voted against intervention just weeks ago. 12 ships. Then 20. Then 30. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The Torvan commander spoke. "Corax fleet, you are ordered to withdraw. The independent powers of the galaxy will not permit this aggression to continue." Thess snarled. "Where was this courage when the vote was taken? You hid behind your excuses. We were wrong." The Torvan's voice carried shame. "We watched humans die to protect innocents we abandoned. We saw what courage looks like. We will not dishonor ourselves further by remaining silent." More ships arrived. The incoming fleet grew to 50 vessels, then 70. They were not enough to destroy the Corax, but combined with the surviving human ships, they changed the calculation. Thess looked at the tactical display. His fleet was damaged. His command structure was disrupted. Fresh enemies were arriving, and his soldiers were watching to see what he would do. He was a warlord. He had built his career on conquest and brutality, but he was not stupid. He knew when a battle had turned. "All ships," he ordered bitterly. "Withdraw." The Corax fleet began to retreat, pulling back toward the edge of the system. They had come expecting easy victory. They left with over 100 ships destroyed and nothing to show for it. On the surface of Nithara, the Velith watched the enemy fleet disappear into hyperspace. For a long moment, no one spoke. They could not believe it. Then the cheering began. It spread across the planet like a wave. In floating cities and island settlements, people embraced and wept and shouted with joy. They had faced extinction, and they had survived. Elder Sitha fell to her knees in the command center. Around her, human officers were collapsing with exhaustion, some crying with relief. They had lost so many friends, but they had won. "They did it," she whispered. "They actually did it." A young officer approached her. "Elder, we have recovery teams searching for escape pods from the Defiance. Admiral Chen's pod has been located. He is alive." Sitha closed her eyes and offered a prayer of thanks to whatever forces watched over the universe. The man who had kept his promise, who had placed his own ship between death and innocent lives, was still alive. The Battle of Nithara was over. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months passed like a healing wound. The scars of battle still marked Nithara's orbit. Debris fields floated where ships had died. But below, on the water moon's surface, life was returning to normal. The floating cities had been repaired. Gardens bloomed again. Children played in streets that had so recently been evacuation routes. Admiral James Chen stood at a window in the medical center in Mithral, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and purple. His left arm was still in a recovery brace, damaged when the Defiance broke apart around him. The doctors said he would regain full use eventually. He was lucky to be alive at all. "Admiral?" A voice came from behind him. He turned to see Elder Sitha approaching. She looked different than she had during the crisis. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by something stronger. She carried herself like a leader who had seen the worst and survived. "Elder." He nodded respectfully. "You look well. As do you, considering you flew your ship into an enemy weapon." She stood beside him at the window. "The doctors tell me you will make a full recovery. So they say. Though I suspect I will never be allowed to command a ship again. Something about reckless disregard for self-preservation." Sitha made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The human who saved our entire capital city with his reckless disregard. I think my people would disagree with that assessment." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the ocean catch the last light of day. "The Council has summoned me," Sitha said finally. "They want me to address the Galactic Union." "I know. Are you ready?" "I have been preparing for 6 months. I know exactly what I want to say." Her large eyes met his. "Will you come with me?" "If you wish." "I do. The galaxy needs to see us standing together. They need to understand what happened here. The journey to the council chambers took several days. This time, Sitha did not travel alone. Human vessels accompanied her ship, and beside her stood Admiral Chen, fully recovered and wearing his formal uniform. The great chamber was fuller than it had been during her first visit. News of the Battle of Nithara had spread across the galaxy. Every species had watched the recordings. Every civilization had debated what it meant. Representatives who had voted against intervention now sat quietly, unable to meet her eyes. The Torvan delegation had been replaced entirely, the previous ambassador recalled in disgrace. The mood was different, charged with something that had not been present before. Shame. The galaxy felt shame. Sitha walked to the central platform. Admiral Chen stood beside her, a silent symbol of everything that had happened. She began to speak. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and begged for help. I told you that my people were innocent, that we had no weapons, that we would die or be enslaved if no one acted. I appealed to your sense of justice, your commitment to the values this council supposedly represents. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space. You refused. Every great power found reasons to look away. The calculations did not work out. The risks were too high, the rewards too small. You measured the value of 12 million lives against your convenience and found us wanting. She paused, letting the silence grow heavy, and then humanity answered. She gestured toward Chen. These people, whom most of you barely knew, offered everything they had. 42 ships against 300. They knew the odds. They knew they would probably die. And they came anyway. Her voice grew stronger. When I asked them why, they told me a story. They told me about a time in their history when nations stood by while innocents were killed. They told me about the guilt that still haunts them. And they told me about a promise they made. 2 words carved into monuments across their world. She spoke those words like sacred text. Never again. The chamber was absolutely silent. Humanity kept that promise. They stood between my people and destruction. They sacrificed their lives for strangers. And when their admiral saw an enemy weapon preparing to destroy our capital city, he flew his own ship into its path. She looked at Chen, and he gave her a slight nod. This is what courage looks like. This is what honor looks like. Not the calculations of diplomats, not the excuses of the powerful. Simply the willingness to do what is right, regardless of the cost. She turned back to the assembly. I did not come here to shame you. Shame serves no purpose if it does not lead to change. I came here to ask a question. What kind of galaxy do you want to live in? She spread her hands. Do you want a galaxy where the strong ignore the weak, where might makes right, where innocence can be conquered and enslaved because they have nothing to offer the powerful? That is the galaxy we had. That is the galaxy that turned away from my people. Her voice dropped. Or do you want a galaxy where someone answers when innocents cry for help? Where courage matters more than calculations? Where the smallest species knows that they are not alone? She pointed toward the human delegation. Humanity showed us what that galaxy could look like. They showed us that it is possible. They stood when everyone else sat. They fought when everyone else ran. They proved that the darkness can be pushed back, even at impossible odds. She took a breath. Today, the Velith formally announce an alliance of mutual defense with the United Human Alliance. We pledge that if any species attacks humanity, we will answer. Our healers will tend their wounded. Our ships will stand beside theirs. We will keep the promise they made to us. She looked around the chamber. This alliance is open to any species willing to make the same commitment. Not calculations, not convenience, simply a promise. If you ask for help, we will answer. If you face darkness alone, we will stand with you. She stepped back. The galaxy watched Nithara and felt shame. Good. Now do something about it. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions, demands, objections. But others were already rising, moving toward the Velith delegation, asking about the terms of this new alliance. Within a week, 12 species had joined. Within a month, 30. The great powers watched nervously as a new force emerged in galactic politics, one based not on military might or economic power, but on a simple promise to stand together. Admiral Chen was asked by countless reporters why humanity had risked everything for a species they barely knew. He gave different answers to different questions, but they all came down to the same core truth. Because they needed help. Because we could give it. because that is who we choose to be. A year later, Ketho stood on Earth. The young Velith healer had become a diplomat, one of the first of his species to live among humans. He walked through cities that had risen from violent history, past monuments to ancient wars and terrible crimes. And everywhere he went, he found people who wanted to hear about Nithara. They wanted to know what it felt like to be protected. They wanted to know that their sacrifices had mattered. They wanted to believe that their promise of never again had finally been kept. Ketho visited a memorial in a city called Washington. It was a simple thing, a wall of names carved into black stone, the names of humans who had died in a war long before space travel. A guide explained that this memorial represented a conflict where humanity had failed to act quickly enough. Millions had died because good people looked away. The memorial existed so that no one would forget that failure. Near the exit, a new section had been added. More names, carved in the same black stone. These were the crews of the ships lost at Nithara, the sailors who had died protecting strangers. The inscription below the names read simply, "They asked. We answered." Ketho stood before that wall for a long time. He read the names of people he had never met, people who had given their lives so that his people could live. He thought about the wounded Korax he had helped heal, about the lesson he had learned from human medics who treated enemies with the same care as friends. He finally understood what made humanity different. It was not their weapons or their technology. It was not their tactics or their courage, though they had plenty of both. It was something simpler and more powerful. It was the choice they made, every day, about who they wanted to be. They could have been conquerors. With their fury and their weapons, they could have dominated the galaxy. But they chose to be protectors. They chose to stand for those who could not stand alone. They chose mercy over vengeance, defense over conquest. That choice was harder than any battle. And they made it again and again. Ketho placed his hand against the cold stone and made a promise of his own. He would spend his life making sure the galaxy remembered what happened at Nithara. He would tell the story to every species who would listen. The story of a people who were abandoned. The story of strangers who answered their call. The story of 40 ships against 300. And the story of what the galaxy could become when good people refused to look away. The humans had risen to protect the forgotten. And in doing so, they had reminded the universe what courage truly meant. The Velith would never forget. Neither would the galaxy.